we run an organization that builds software and websites for everybody else. Folks come to us with their dreams, with their business innovation, with their ideas, and we figure out ways to make dreams come true. You know, Mike and I have a really organic story. We met when we were 15 years old on a Long Island rock climbing gym called Island Rock, shameless plug. And, you know, our journey really began with just being friends. We had absolutely no idea that we were going to end up in business together. We both had our separate careers and separate interests. We went away to separate schools. But as luck would have it, the force of the universe kind of brought us back to having a shared interest in starting a business together. And we definitely did not start in the business that we have today. So, Mike, why don't you tell them a little bit about how we started and what happened and how we got here?
Yeah. I think the way we started was we were originally set out to build a SaaS product. We were not thinking to build a service business. I was an engineer working at a startup, and Justin was doing, as you were a CSM probably 2 jobs ago now,
Yeah.
right? So something like that. And we were working together on an app that was going to replace the punch cards at coffee shops. That was our idea.
Membo.
We called it. And we started building it. We were designing it. And I think that what ended up happening is we realized that we had trouble selling it. The coffee shops like the punch cards, which was probably an important lesson for the people we deal with now, which is make sure your product is something people want to build before you build it. And that's kind of, so we pivoted from that to the idea was to do like an auction type platform for experiential experiences with athletes that you love. That was interesting, but we discovered that it already exists. And then we got into t-shirts. We were doing t-shirts for a minute, and that was a really difficult business before we finally said, hey, maybe we should use our skills and build a service business, because no matter what, people need software, people need SEO. Let's just do that. And we got our first customer, and the rest is history. And we've stuck with that. And I think that I would advise people, a service business is a great place to start if you're looking to get into entrepreneurship.
That's great. That's a great story, because what it tells me is you may not hit it off on your first business venture, but the true entrepreneur will keep at it until they discover what their true calling is and their true purpose for having a company. So that's a great story. How'd you come on to the name of Cause of a Kind?
So it was interesting. We originally had that product Membo, and so Justin had an LLC because he was starting a CrossFit gym. And when we founded Membo, instead of registering a new LLC, we just changed the name of that to Membo. And then when we decided to do the auction platform, Membo didn't make a whole lot of sense. And we were out surfing one day, and we were like, yeah, it's going to be like one-of-a-kind experiences for causes. And then we sort of just came up with the play on words, cause of a kind. We changed the name again. Then we did the t-shirt. We kept the name because the t-shirts were being sold for causes, for social good. So we kept the name for that. And then when we pivoted to the agency model, I think we discussed name changing a few times because we were like, maybe it doesn't quite make sense. But I think we had realized at that point, if we get big enough, the name will make sense. What's a Google? What's a, right?
It's a Yahoo. Well, okay, right. I know what a Yahoo is.
Yeah. We come from New York, right?
We said, we're not going to change the name again. Let's just run with it. And we've ran with it ever since. And we built a new logo around it. So like that was, I think Justin has the original sketches that I made of the logo, and we designed the whole brand around it. And we said, let's just stick with this and run with it. But that's really where the name came from, Born in the Surf lineup.
That's interesting. And you mentioned rock climbing. You also mentioned surfing. Not, I would say, a mainstream type of sports that you might meet people at. But that's fantastic. And I know, Justin, you've done some, I guess it was Instagrams or videos for the website where you're climbing up and down a mountain.
That's right.
But the interesting thing, and for all of you potential customers, of course, of a kind out there, they're going to make money for you as soon as they meet you, because actually Justin's business card is a $2 bill.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to generate revenue before you ever even think about working with us.
Right. So that's a little side story that we're going to. But what was the biggest challenge or hurdle that you faced when you decided, okay, we're going to build websites and apps for other people?
We might give different answers. So Justin, you go first,
Yeah.
and then I'll give mine and see if it's the same.
You know, the biggest challenge for me, I come from multiple generations of entrepreneurship. I've tried tons of different businesses in my life. I really have never been successful at generating revenue and profit, and that's always been a key component. So I went the path of going and getting skills and starting a career, and those core competencies fuel our organization today and our customer first motion. The biggest challenge for me, Steve, was when. I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I think you've even met my mother before. Like, I come from 7 generations of entrepreneurship, apparently. My biggest challenge was, when was I going to find the time, the financial stability, the path in life, the idea, like, when was I going to find the time to make the commit? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurship is going all in, and like, you can of course have side hustles, you can of course have side interests, you can build businesses on the side, that's all well and good. But when it's going to be your primary breadwinner, when you're going to hang your hat in an idea, the concept of when eluded me. I got very comfortable in a career, I got very skillful and talented at a career, I was very recognized in my career, and all of those things created an environment of comfort. So for me, the inception of when was I going to nuke the career? When was I going to go all in and take this entire risk to build a business? And I had things at stake. I had a mortgage. I had a family on the way. I had like a partner that I really care about. I had a career that I was sacrificing, that I was no longer going to have that identity. And like that opportunity came along with COVID. And I think an unprecedented amount of time, putting us in the ability to split time, eliminate commutes, watch the market trend, understand I'm probably never going to go back to work. So now's a great time for me to rethink what work looks like. And I just think general natural forces of the universe kind of put me in the right position to have the guts to go all in.
Oh, that is interesting, because so my answer is definitely different.
Good.
I think the leap of going all in, I envisioned being scarier than it actually was.
Yeah.
When we finally went all in,
Me too.
We had won a bunch of business. We had done really, and I had worked as a freelancer before too, so I was very comfortable with my ability to at least find enough work that the two of us would be able to support each other in like a service type model. And I always thought I could always go back to work. I had this skill. I was a software engineer. I had gotten to a level that I felt confident interviewing anywhere, which was actually probably the biggest hurdle to learning that career, is getting to a place where you felt like you could beat the interview process and do really well. And so I was very confident that if it didn't work out, I could go back. I think the hardest thing for me was once we started running the company that first year, and we had more projects than I could possibly work on myself. So when it was just me and you, it was not so bad, because I was doing a lot of the work, and I'd hire maybe 1 or 2 other people to give me a hand. We scaled to a place where I had to be able to export my abilities to other people, and I had to come up with a process to consistently deliver work, which is very different than being an engineer inside of a large startup, because there's a little less pressure on the delivery of like deadlines and things like that than inside of an agency, when people are paying you money in like a time and materials type basis, or you've hedged your bet and given, we've gotten that, we can talk about that all day, about giving fixed prices and trying to beat deadlines. Exporting my skill set to the team and making sure things were delivered on time, that was really hard, especially in that first year. And it seems like a distant memory, because now we deliver on time all the time, but it took a lot to figure that process out. It was almost like I knew nothing, because I knew a lot about writing code, but I had to learn about how to deliver or get other people to deliver in the same capacity, and that was hard.
Those are both great stories, and to me, what it reminds me of is that some people start off thinking, I'm going to go in business and I'm going to create a company, and all they really do is create a really nice job for themselves, slightly better than a hobby.
Yeah.
And you're out to make a business, and you're scaling the business. The other thing I find interesting is that while you've been members now for almost 2 years, you're also some of our younger members, even considering in age, even considering those that are participants in our next gen groups who are aspiring to take over family businesses. So you've gone out and established a business. Now, what are some of the projects you've worked on, and in particular, what's the most challenging and the most proud that you've been on a particular project or product that you've produced for someone?
You know, I thought you were going to go in a different direction, and I'm going to answer the direction I thought you were going to go into, and I'm going to tie it into the question that you ultimately
So this
asked
is
me.
like a political debate.
It's not a debate. This is not up for debate. What I'm about to say. A long time ago, you brought up like we're the youngest in age in the group, and that doesn't surprise me in the least. Mike and I set out to learn as much as we could in the form of wisdom to generate a durable business that could survive us. Our goal is bigger than operating a business. I need to learn from people that have survived their business and gotten to a level of freedom, a level of value, a level of impact that I have never seen firsthand. So I thought you were going to ask, like about our age and like how did we get into Compel and like what were the purposes of that and why have we stuck with it for as long as we have? And it's because wisdom drives the decisions that we make in our business, and it's the collective wisdom of that group. Now, that also ties very nicely into the projects that I'm most proud of, because the projects that impacted me and the ones that I hang my hat on now that meet the mission of Cause of a Kind, which is cause back and mission driven software for businesses that are cause back and mission driven. We did those projects prior to ever even being in Compel. Now I take those types of projects as like they meet our brand ethos. So when we did work for Lives and Livelihood Funds, when we did work for iFit, a Nordic track company, when we did work for Hospital for Special Surgery, that's all prior to us ever having the wisdom, the collective knowledge that we have a baked mission, we have a baked persona, our brand has an identity, and how do we deliver to the world? So for me, I'm most proud of staying focused in our macro mission prior to ever even knowing how to operate this business functionally. And a lot of the pain that we have experienced in the beginning of running Cause of a Kind happens from those years. Those were the scrappiest projects that we had to put together. That was the most trust we had to put in other teams because it was more than Mike could ever deliver on his own. It was the most exposed we ever felt. We had brand new families. We had just nuked our careers. So the projects that I'm most proud of are the ones where the most struggle was experienced. And now the collective wisdom of what Compel provides to us allows us to travel fearlessly as we look for new businesses that meet our mission. It allows us to say no to customers that might not meet our mission, that might not meet our ethos, that might not meet our vibe. Mike and I run a lot on energy, and like, I just want to work with people that I can have a drink with, that I can go out and have an enjoyable experience with. And those have now become the best projects to work on. It might not be the fanciest piece of software. It might not be the most dynamite website, but a hug, a handshake, a thank you, being able to meet you in person in Manhattan or on the island or wherever else at a networking event, to have that gratitude, those have now become, the true north of how we operate as a business. But it's a real meshing of those two things, the pursuit of wisdom and the authenticity that we always had at the beginning, which is to build for cause back and mission driven businesses. And it's in the name still today.
Great.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing I'm most proud of, I talk a lot about our delivery process. I think that was hard won. And in our first year, we had a ton of really big clients, and a lot of it was project based. And then we actually experienced the big tech layoffs at the end of 2022. We lost a lot of our big projects. So I think I'm really proud that we survived 2023 because that was hard. And it was really hard to lean the team up that much and still deliver on basically the same amount of work the following year with a third of the staff, which was very, very difficult. But it also allowed us to hone this process in that we have. And I really do believe that our process for delivering software is best in class. Like, it's one thing to say that in your first year. Of course, we say that, but now I believe it because I know it to be true, because I know that we deliver better than any company I've ever worked at before. So I can say, like, when I worked at bigger companies that had tons of product managers and designers and all sorts of bureaucracy and agile processes and frameworks, we're beating that consistently and delivering projects at a speed and at a rate now that I'm really proud of, because I really know how to do it. Whereas in the beginning, you're really kind of selling that and you kind of have an idea, but it really feels like it's coming together. It's fully come together now, and I can teach it to every new staff member that comes in. So I'm really proud of our ability to deliver consistently. And then, of course, customers we've had for 3-4 years now, which is awesome too, when you have customers for that long. So that's a pretty big accomplishment, I think.
That is a tremendous accomplishment, repeat customers. But I have to tell you, I like your answers better than I like my question, I think. But it's, what it's indicative of, what you just described is, and I'll put it in one word, hunger. And you've survived and grown your business. Like many young entrepreneurs, you're hungry, but you took it to another level and you used speed and passion and commitment and dedication to get it to where it is. And now you're leveraging all of that and collective wisdom to take it to the next level. So congratulations. What's been the most challenging situation or project that someone asked you to deliver for them?
Man, I think that in our first year, I would say we had a customer that we had a pretty large scope. It wouldn't have been HSS, but I remember this customer specifically. We scoped out the project. We even flew to their office, had a great plan for it. And about halfway through the project, they were pitching venture capital firms. And I was fractional CTO helping them pitch. And the venture capital firms started giving them all sorts of reasons they didn't want to invest. And based on those reasons, they wanted to change. They were changing the scope of everything, and they were doubting everything that they built. And delivering that project was very difficult because it's like the person just keeps moving the target. And I was not quite as experienced as because I hadn't experienced that before, where someone became so unsure of themselves based on something a venture capitalist said. And the funny thing is, they would change things, and the VC still wouldn't invest in them. And so it becomes sort of like a counterfeit. The counterfeit yes, as Chris Voss would say, is like they were really just excuses, and they were trying to let them down easy that they were not going to invest in this idea. And so I had to rein them in. They were going to rein them in, say, hey, the original idea was still good. Let's deliver on the original promise. It took a massive amount of man hours to get it over the line, but also keeping the founder from being really fickle about it. And that has now become a part of the process, which is, hey, we should not scope things out up front like that. We should take smaller steps, figure out what it is people are going to buy first or invest in, if that's the path you want to take. I would argue, find the thing people want to buy, and the investors will want to invest in you without giving you a million excuses why not. That was definitely a difficult project, though, because the founder was very difficult, and it just felt like we were hitting this moving target week after week after week. They started going in the crypto direction at one point because that was big at one point. We were like, wait a minute, this is a completely different product than we've been building for the last 3 months. We're like, we have to figure it out. So long story short, that was a huge lesson learned and the most difficult project to get over the line for sure.
Steve, your question was twofold: difficult project to deliver or tough experience to have gone through. I'm going to take us in a little different direction, which is the topic of debt. And I caution entrepreneurs, especially young ones, as they look at the opportunity of other people's money, whether it's VC, whether it's lines of credit, whether it's loans, whether it's debt from family, whatever you want to do. Debt for us has always been a challenge to navigate. And it's because of a lack of experience with managing money of that size and with, the responsibility of generating revenue and profit to be able to manage and maintain debt and lines of credit. So when Mike's brain goes to managing difficult projects, I take us in the different direction, which is managing finances. And I can honestly say that you, Steve, and Compel have completely fundamentally changed our relationship and experience with managing money. And you can't run a business without being an accountant yourself. You can leverage those types of teams. You can go and search for that type of knowledge. You can hire a bookkeeper. You can hire a CPA talk about money out. That's an expense. That's overhead that you add to your business. If you're not a master of money for yourself, that becomes a challenge. That's Mount Everest that builds up behind you. So we never have a problem anymore of delivering the work that we set out to. But managing money is an infinite challenge. If you can't manage $100,000, you're not going to be able to manage $1 million. You're not going to be able to manage a $10 million run rate. So when I start thinking about what are the primary challenges of our business, I sleep very well at night knowing that we're going to ship. That's what we pride on. We've been through a lot to try and make sure that we can ship on the projects that we set out to ship with. Managing money is still the thing that we run a plague on. How do you scale a business? We've scaled this business to a certain revenue echelon. I still have pain in my stomach about taking on too much debt, having too much debt to service, having to search for refinancing, having to leverage our homes and assets, having to be so exposed because I didn't know how to leverage debt. The key of that is using debt to generate exponential revenue. We didn't know how to do that. We used debt to hedge a bet, to safely exit careers, to move into this environment. And my relationship with money has fundamentally changed. And I encourage anybody that has a poor relationship with finances, that is the place to start. Learn to manage that budget, learn how to forecast. And for me, that has been a master class that I wish I'd had prior to ever running this business. A relationship with cash would have been substantially different and is now today. And it took us about 3 years to figure out how to manage the amount of revenue that we generate these days.
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, I remember nights where we were like, "Oh crap! Like we're going to be out of money. Like we have to figure out what we're going to do." Because again, that was all business model stuff too. We used to have net 30 contracts thing, and so you're paying your employees, and then people are paying 30 days later, and sometimes people are withholding payment and if they wanted certain types of deliverables. We really had to. That's all business model stuff. That's not necessarily execution. We had to change the model to meet a financial model that we could actually sustain. So it worked out for the best, but it was definitely a hard lesson learned.
So what you two just identified is the key element to attaining success as entrepreneurs, and that is managing your cash flow.
Oh yeah.
Because no one other than an accountant or a CPA goes into business to have the best accounting and finance department in the world. You go into business because you know how to do something or make something or sell something. That's the MO of most entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So great wisdom you just put out there for our audience. If you're a burgeoning entrepreneur or a wannabe entrepreneur, keep in mind you have to manage your cash flow. Because if you're good enough at making or doing or selling, you won't have to worry about getting clients, but you're going to have to worry about managing your cash flow. So that was a great answer. You mentioned someone, Chris Voss.
Oh yeah.
So I know that you two, go to conferences. You are very outgoing, meeting people, reading books. What conference, book, or meeting an individual has had the greatest impact for you personally and professionally?
Oh man. So
That's a list.
that's a list. Well, let's say like personally, the first book that comes to mind is Escape from Freedom by Erich Fromm. That's probably the most impactful book I've ever read in my life. And sometimes I don't like reading it because sometimes it messes with you a little bit. You're like, yeah, but it's a very good book. And then professionally, I could give a bigger list there. I think you've mentioned Chris Voss. Never Split the Difference, I think, is great for both life and personal. The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz is an amazing book for people who are looking to get into startups. The Lean Startup by Eric Ries is another great one, specifically if you're involved in software. And then more of a story that is just good if you're interested in technology and innovation and you maybe come from more traditional places. The Soul of a New Machine is incredible. It's about a company that is building a portable computer that probably doesn't meet today's standards of portable. They're called Data General. in like the 80s, and they put together sort of this team within the company that's just a ragtag group of engineers that build this sort of impossible project, and it documents the true journey of them doing it. And I love that book. And I said, this is what building technology and innovation is all about. And it kind of shows you what it takes to do that. And I think it doesn't take all the things that people think. In a lot of ways, it requires them to think completely differently than the rest of their business when it comes to building innovation. So that's an important one.
You know, Mike and I are avid readers. I consume content mostly through audio. I think that's what scales. You know, I'm an avid walker pretty much on a daily basis. And like that just fits nicely into the multitask of walking. I consume probably north of 30 books a year. And I'm always in pursuit of this common core, which is wisdom and courage. And I think that those are really the two reasons why I read personal account. My wife is an avid reader, like consumes a 1,000-page book in a sitting, like just an exceptional sponge. But her preference is, you know, sci-fi and fantasy and horror, and like a super fan of Stephen King. And mine is about real account. I take that experience across all sorts of domains, whether I'm reading about climbers, whether I'm reading about spiritualists or mentalists or business operators. One of the best books that I've read recently, we've both read it simultaneously. Mike and I have like a little book club. We read the same book at the same time so that we can, you know, learn different things. We learn at different rates. Alex Hormozi is really changing my perspective right now. And I'll tell you that he has put out 2 books. He's got another one on the way. I wish I could meet Alex, not for any clout, but just to shake his hand, because he emulates the courage that it takes to go and run a company, a corporation, to make a move in when the world is stacked up against you. He writes a book called $100 Million Offers. You can't run a business without figuring out your $100 million offer. Doesn't mean that you're going to be a $100 million business or a $1 billion business or even a $500,000 business. But you were just talking about it a little while ago, Steve. Like, you could be a maker, you could be a manufacturer, you could be a producer, you could be a service worker, like whatever your competency is, you have to figure out what your $100 million offer is. How do you differentiate from the guy standing next to you that does the same thing, same talent, same location, same education? Like, what's the differentiating factor? And Alex Hormozi breaks this idea down into constructing your unfair advantage. And then he takes you into another book, which is incredible in its own right, which is $100 million Leads, how to take your offer and generate pipeline. And these are like the 2 eluding scenarios of entrepreneurship and running a business. People staff up with sales teams, deep inbound marketing motions, sales development representatives. Like, pipeline is the great elusive burden. You made 100 million last year, you got to make 200 million this year. The growth trajectory of an organization is a plague. So he teaches the general business owner in his competency. It's about like dirty businesses, about gyms and fitness centers, and like that's what he like hung his hat on. But for me, I take the core competencies there, and Mike and I have figured out how to generate our $100 million offer, our differentiating factors, and now the pipeline fills itself. The attractiveness of the brand, the indifference of Mike and I, the comfort that people feel when they take a call with us and learn something from the first 5 minutes of taking a discussion with us. That all comes from this search of wisdom and the confidence and courage that I gain, that Mike gains from reading other people's real accounts. Nothing that we're going through is unique, and reading for me humanizes what we're up against.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you got to read things again, because I read a lot of things when I was an employee, but wasn't putting them into practice. Yeah. So like The Hard Thing About Hard Things, I've read at least twice now. And the first time I read it, I was an employee. Didn't really help me much as an employee. I reread it as a business owner and I go, oh, this is now useful. So if you've read a lot of these books kind of dreaming to be an entrepreneur, you do actually have to put the book down and act and start doing the thing, because you're never going to get it right, especially things like Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss's advice. It takes years of practice to get good at these things. And then reread the book again after you've been in it, because now that you are an entrepreneur or a CEO or a CTO, these things will make more sense and you'll pick new things up out of it.
Great piece of advice. And you mentioned Chris Voss twice, and his best-selling
Super
book,
fan.
The Never Split the Difference. Chris is a former FBI agent, and he was their top negotiator, primarily in hostage situations.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how you split a hostage in half, split the difference on it, but it was a great title of the book. And he also leads a company called the Black Swan Group, which, if you think about it, it's a very unique situation.
Yeah.
You know, a black swan you don't see too often. So, and you mentioned uniqueness. What's your secret weapon?
Man, I wish I had a better answer than it's us.
Mm-hmm.
And I realize that's not exportable or scale. You know, how do we scale? That'll be our next big challenge probably. But Mike and Justin are very much the brand of Cause of a Kind. I think we're the reason people come in and stay with us. It's, you know, it's not because of price. It's not because of anything. It's because, hey, they trust us to deliver. And it's our experience and the way we come off. So I think that early on, you as the founder have to be the first salesperson. I had to come to terms with this because if you ask me, I love being in front of the computer and building, right? But you can't spend your time there. You're the initial product. It's the trust in you because your business is still a fledgling. So that, you know, it's not any more than your personality. And Justin and I have really embraced that, learning from a lot of what you see in the solopreneurship kind of influencer market, which is, it's got to be the Mike and Justin show in the beginning, and eventually that's going to grow beyond us, and Cause of a Kind will be able to stand on its own without us. I think very similar to raising a child, right? It's at some point they're going to stand on their own and go out into the world. But for now, that's kind of the secret sauce is Justin and I are the practitioners, and we run the projects, and we're involved with all the customers, and we run the sales process. And I think people really adhere to that. I think that's really the secret sauce behind it.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, let's call it like an unfair advantage. I think, you know, Mike and I are very much simpatico. We have a saying in our organization, which is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hard no. This is how we make a lot of decisions. It's how we've gotten ourselves into trouble too, but nobody's to blame. There's very much an equal share. We're a 50-50 split on a simple LLC. We both have the same family stakes, the same assets. Like, we just happen to be yin and yang.
Well, that is very interesting, right? A lot of people wonder, they're like, what if you're in a deadlock, right? It's 50-50. I go, a deadlock isn't it's a no. It's a no. Unless you get two yeses, it's a no. And that's actually the superpower, because what we say is a yes is a no to many things. A no is a no to one thing. So you can't feel bad about the no. It's the yes that pushes other opportunities off to the side. The yes is dangerous. So if one person's a yes and the other's a no, and we say no, well, that's just one thing we decided not to do. And somebody had a bad feeling, and we just trust that. We let the universe of someone didn't trust it. That's fine. We're not gonna go forward with that. But we know deep down it left open other opportunities. So if you're always biasing towards the no, the default answer is no, we're not going to do that unless you get the two yeses. It's really simple for us. And sometimes, I mean, people are like, is it frustrating? I go, not really. I just know. I know that if he didn't feel good about it, I don't want to walk into a bad situation either. Something told him or something told me this isn't a good situation, so we just avoid it.
Another great piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs, especially those that are in partnerships, and reminds me of that old saying, some of the best deals you do are the ones you never do. So great advice. Is there anything that you would do differently now that you have had a few years under your belt?
Yeah, you know, I think anybody that says no, I wouldn't do anything differently, I think probably isn't thinking hard enough. You know, there are definitely things that I think that we would do differently. You know, I look again at our relationship with money. I think fear of you know, kind of the unknown cliff of entrepreneurship was the original catalyst of us thinking about taking on debt. I think we could have did without that. I think we would have been fine. I think we would have confronted some really hard decisions, like leaning a team or dropping a bad customer or What happens if you miss a deadline? Like, there are lots of things that our experience, that we didn't have experience in, that I think might have saved us a little bit of pain and anguish originally. But I also think, like, there are things that we absolutely would not do differently. I think the way that we conduct our relationship, I would do five times in 5 lifetimes. Like, I think the way that we trust each other's domains implicitly, like, while we have a code and it's if it's not a hell yes, it's a hard no. If it's Mike's domain, I bow out. If it's my domain, Mike bows out. I think the way that we have architected our relationship and then built a business, that I would do 1,000 times over. But I think that we've made decisions where, like, again, my pursuit of wisdom, had I started that first, had I stayed at my job for a longer period of time and not taken a salary from the business, maybe one of us exited at one time rather than both of us at the same time, which is a very, very much so a strain on revenue and cash flow. There are moves in this chess game that I might have done differently, but in the macro, I'm doing this every lifetime.
Yeah, I would have hired a little slower and fired a little faster. I think that's for sure. And I remember one time we kind of were talking about letting someone go one time that wasn't really up to snuff, and we had both never actually fired anybody before, and we didn't really realize that. And I go, I never actually sat down with somebody and said, I have to let you, like, I had an employee once that was underperforming. I said, the few times that happened in my previous career, they actually left on their own. So the problem kind of solved itself. And I think, Justin, you had the same situation, and we were like, we're going to have to let this person go. And it was, we just kind of avoided it for too long, and we don't make that mistake anymore. But there were a few times where we made the wrong hire, and we knew it was wrong, but we kind of let it persist a little too long. And I think I would have hired slower too. I would have like you said in the beginning, taking on a little more of the work ourselves, bringing in really, really strong talent, and kind of doing more trial runs with people, because we definitely staffed up very quickly as though we were just going to keep growing at the same rate and nothing bad was ever going to happen. And then when something bad happened, we ended up having to do like 10 layoffs at one day. So we got it, that was pretty tough. We had to kind of, now we're much slower to hire, and we review people much more rigorously, I would say.
So another 2 great bits of wisdom for the audience: hire slow and fire fast.
Yeah.
Don't tolerate people that don't fit in.
Can't.
Great. We've had a tremendous impact over the last year with AI, and if I look back, and I don't exactly, want to pretend that this is completely accurate, but over the last 200 plus years, we've gone from doubling our knowledge every 100 years to, it seems like, doubling our knowledge every 100 days. And now we have AI. What do you think, if you look forward 5, 10, 15 years, beyond that technology, or will it just be that technology, what's going to have the greatest impact or be the greatest disruptor?
So for me, two things I say, like, so AI has really changed the way that we develop software in a lot of ways. Like, we use it every day. I use it in my IDE or my code editor. It's very helpful. I think that one thing I've learned is when we started this business in 2022, Web3 and crypto was all the rage. And we went full into this. And we were going to write smart contracts, and then the whole industry blew up overnight. And people ask, why? Was crypto not useful? No, crypto is still useful. There are still crypto companies that raised good money, but a lot of VCs overinvested in companies that were junk. And then you had a situation like FTX, where a bunch of people lost a ton of money to fraud. AI has all of the same trappings of that now. So my caution as a business looking at AI is, we do AI, but we're not an AI company, because I don't like to pin my company to any one trending technology of the moment, because as amazing as it seems, in the Web3 days, there were people saying this is going to change everything. The way we build every single app is going to completely change. That didn't end up being true. Now, will the same be true of AI? Maybe, maybe not. AI has a lot of investment pouring into what will inevitably be a lot of junky companies. And it only takes one company defrauding one large body of people for regulation to come in and kill everything, regardless of how good AI is. So, as amazing as it is, it can be regulated away in a moment. And not that I'm saying that it will, but I come into it with the caution that we all have to be responsible about whatever new technology we're using. And I caution people building with AI right now to actually be truthful in the claims that you're making, because we've seen this too with a lot of code tools where the claims were completely fabricated. So now that I've been using AI a while, I do think it's going to revolutionize things in a way that is the opposite of how most people talk about it. Most people talk about AI as eliminating employees and jobs. I don't think that's going to be the case. What we're seeing is people want to invest in software more than ever now because they see AI the way they saw the web, and people who maybe were late to the web don't want to be late on the AI thing. And AI is definitely more accessible than Web3 because Web3 increased your cost of software development to build a web or crypto app, but AI is bringing the cost of software development down. Even for us, it's allowing us to build bigger projects faster. So people who were dealing with very general pieces of software, let's say something like Salesforce, it's sort of this general software that everybody uses. A lot of people are frustrated by it because it doesn't quite meet the use case. It's broad, it's big, it's bloated. When software building costs come down and timelines come down and more people feel connected to it, they're going to say, oh, I could have a specific solution for my business. So we're seeing more and more people who are like, actually, I'd like you to come in and build me a bespoke solution. This age-old adage of like, software is really expensive, you should buy it, you don't want to build it. I think AI is trending people towards maybe I could build that thing and maybe it would help. Again, they're usually looking at it from the place of I want to offset some personnel costs where there's these sort of monotonous jobs that are happening internally. But from an engineering perspective, I think that there's never been a better time to get into engineering and to be in software and to be computer literate because you're going to have tools available to you that, again, going back to that book, Soul of a New Machine, if you read about what they had to go through to build an operating system, we have tools available to us now that make software so accessible to so many different types of people that I think it's never been a better time to get involved in this. And you're going to see a lot more people tinkering and building bespoke solutions and incorporating technology into their business the way they hadn't in the past. So it's going to kind of create this explosion of, oh, we can do all these things that we'd always dreamed of doing because the cost of it isn't prohibitive anymore.
You know, going like a slightly different direction, which is AI doesn't replace anything that the human itself craves. So, for example, most humans crave some type of human-to-human interaction. It is bimillennial, it's biological. It's something that probably can't be replaced by the machine. It can be facilitated by the machine. It can be optimized by the machine. I think the machine has a role as an agent of the human experience. But where I see AI in the future is an agent of the human experience, whether it's in the job place, whether it's in how we interact with our families, whether it's in our homes, whether, etc. I don't see the future of AI impacting the need for the human connection. I see it altering the human connection. I see it impacting the way that people conduct themselves, do business. I see the way that the macro system works, maybe the way it changes law enforcement or, different ways of moving about a country or about a location or whatever else. I think it can impact a lot of the human experience. But there's something to be said about one of the superpowers that Mike and I have, which is the ability to put on sneakers, get out into the world and shake somebody's hand. And there's no secret as a small business to generating trust in relationships. That doesn't happen with an AI solution, and I don't see that changing. What I do see is the retouch, the engagement, the nurturing, the marketing motion, the scalability of the human experience I see being altered by AI, but I don't really see the biological need for the human to human connection being replaced. I don't see that happening in our lifetime. I don't really even see that happening in my son's lifetime. I think for as long as there are humans, there will be this need to be void of technology. So while we are technologists, and while I speak a lot on adopting and adapting to AI and thinking about running pilot programs, and it's never been more accessible to businesses, and I encourage businesses to think about operationally how they can leverage AI to emerge, to hit a new echelon of performance. I also encourage people and businesses to think very humanly about the thing that you do. And most of the time, you're a human selling to humans, servicing humans, providing solutions to humans. And to lose that human element to the machine could be a catastrophe over a short period of time. So I really think that there is a balance. There's a fiduciary responsibility as you adopt and adapt to new technology, whether it's crypto, whether it's AI, whatever that is going to be. There will be new emergences that we see over the near future of our lifetimes. Maintaining the human element is critical to running a business, regardless of the scale. You need humans to build Tesla. You need humans to innovate at Facebook. Regardless of the size of your entity or corporation, humans still run the world and probably always will.
Well, the motivation comes from the human. And I think, I talked about the book that's had a big impact on me personally, which is Escape from Freedom. He talks a little bit about the Industrial Revolution outsourcing our physical abilities to machines, and the technological revolution, and this book was written a very long time ago, increasingly outsourcing our mental abilities to the machine. And I would caution people, the idea is that it creates a disconnect between human and their work and their craft. And there's something deeply depressing about that forms. And I think that what we will find out from AI, probably from the pendulum swinging maybe too far in one direction, is that sometimes we build because we like to. And that it might be, even though some people are like, you don't have to learn to code anymore. You don't have to learn how computers work. Or maybe you could because it's interesting to you. And we can just do things because they're interesting. And don't lose the connection to the work. It's interesting how LLMs work. You should feel inspired to learn about them, even if you're simply going to be an operator of them. And one of the things we strive for when we build is when a piece of software is done, they say a good technology should be indistinguishable from magic when it's complete. I tell people that's great as a goal for users, but you should try to deconstruct the magic once in a while. Understand it. I hear a lot of people talking about AI. It's very magical. But there's also a method to it, and it's very interesting. And when you really dive into it, and if we have all this free time because of AI taking away lots of jobs, then you should have the free time to learn about it. So we should use that.
Just for the novices in the audience, LLM is
large language models. So it's like ChatGPT and Anthropic and those tools.
You hit on a very important note here, and that is it is biological. It's a biological necessity to have human-to-human contact. Otherwise, we'll die off. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. So in summary, I can break this down to a few words for aspiring entrepreneurs. It's not enough to have the hunger and the desire. You also have to have the courage and the wisdom. And one of the key wisdoms is managing of cash flow, as well as managing those who are going to work for you, mm-hmm. so that they can be as productive as possible. Any final comments, gentlemen?
Well, first of all, I have to thank you, Steve. You continue to surprise us. I think being a part of your sphere and being a part of your influence, and getting to know you personally, getting to know your family personally. This is a family business after all. It has never failed to take us to the next level. It has never failed to inspire us. And I think that there is something to be said for the curious entrepreneur to have a sense of humility. You don't know what you're doing, period. So go and find people that have been there and done that and built businesses and failed and taken risks and built relationships and built a code of ethics for themselves and their families and their you don't know what you're doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. And if I ever figure out what I'm doing, I'll figure out something that I don't know to do so that I'm curious again and I can go and figure out a new path and I'll find new mentorship. So for me, I just want to thank you. You're a terrific podcast host. You're a terrific mentor and friend. And Compel has been absolutely valuable to Mike and I in our journey. And I encourage anybody out there that is struggling or thinking about embracing this struggle to go and dive into mentorship. There's lots of it out there. And Compel is just a shining example of what's possible.
I think my final thought is there's always another move on the board.
True.
So if you're in business and you think, checkmate, I'm done with cash flow, with employees, with business, we've always found there's another move. It may be painful. It may be a very distasteful move to use a word I use a lot in our meetings, but there's always another move on the board to stay alive. The goal is to stay in business, especially in the beginning. Just stay in business. Keep going. You have to stay alive long enough to get lucky. And when you do, it works out. And that's my last piece of advice, I'd say.
Great advice, great perspectives, and thank you very much for the acknowledgement. I truly appreciate it. So please keep in mind that we're going to be doing more of these compelling conversations. We thank you for listening, and we hope to speak with you again in the near future.
Thanks, Steve.
We're done.
Thanks, Steve.
Terrific. Thank you. That was great. That was the longest one.
Oh, wow.